So my mum was sitting watching Reporting Scotland, and I'll pop a picture of me holding like a Notts County scarf or holding a shirt, something like that, like, on BBC Reporting Scotland. So immediately my phone rang. Um, this was my mum being like, what on earth have I just witnessed on my television screen in front of me?
Hello and welcome to another episode of the CSI Football Podcast, where we embark on a forensic delve into a particular season of football, usually with a tartan tint. I'm your host Ian Stephen, and for today's episode we meet perhaps the only footballer who has led out their country at a World Cup whilst being able to systematically analyse Rangers' convoluted accounts from 2011. With Scotland in the playoff for the Euros in 2025 in Switzerland, let's find out if she'll be a Swiss miss. Well, she missed the Swiss. It's Aston Villa defender Rachel Corsie. Rachel, great to see you.
So I've got a couple of questions just to start you off. Number one, are you related to the great bowls player Richard Corsie? Okay,
No.
that's half an hour of the script gone. And I've got another question, okay? This is something that's troubled me. I mean, I was putting together, I work for ITV, I'll do stuff with the football on ITV, and I was putting together a lot of the terminology for the Women's World Cup recently, and a lot of the women's teams have got nicknames. Obviously, the Lionesses, that's the nickname with Singapore, really is. They stole it from Singapore. You've also got the Matildas, the Belgian Red Flames, the Cameroon Indomitable Lionesses, Ethiopia are called Lucy for some reason, Vietnam Golden Girls, and my personal favourite, Bafana. But we don't have a nickname for the Scotland international team. Why is that?
I'm not entirely sure why we haven't quite found one. I do know that there was I was part of a conversation. It was a very loose conversation at one point in time, about throwing around some ideas. It was whilst I was in Scotland camp, and it was a very loose discussion. There was no, I don't know if it actually ever had the possibility of gathering much momentum, or if it was just a bit of fun at the time. I don't know really. I also don't know why I also don't quite know where it started, what the history of it is, because I think the Lionesses, is fairly new for England. I think that was part of, I think at some point in time they maybe went down a new brand avenue.
There's some Singapore's name and thought, well, like that, we'll take that.
You go. I know the Matildas of that's probably the first one I was aware of. That's the one I've known for the longest. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know why we don't have one. I think I reckon that there's the possibility of suggesting one and seeing where it gets to.
May I have a suggestion proffered to yourself?
I don't know that I'm have any authority to take it anywhere either, but I'm open to suggestions.
Well,
yes.
do you know what the national animal of Scotland is?
I do.
And
It's a unicorn.
do you know what it's famous for in folklore? It's famous in folklore for being the beast that can kill the lion.
Interesting. Okay.
It is. Nowadays, it's unicorn sounds something that's a bit kind of Disney film, but in the past in folklore, it was seen as being a very fierce and noble animal. And the emblem for Scotland with the unicorn has chains around it to show that only the Scottish kings could control a unicorn.
Right. So you're saying we should be the unicorns?
It's a possibility. The other suggestions, you've either got the thistles or the heathers, which sounds a bit twee, sort of.
Yeah. Well, I think with thistles is the netball team or the thistles.
Okay.
So that's gone. So they've got that one locked in.
Okay. So let's start from the beginning. Where were you born and brought up, and who was your girlhood club?
Oh, I was born in Aberdeen and brought up in Aberdeen. My parents are still there. And childhood club, as in who did I play for? Or
yeah, who did you support? Who was your first love, essentially?
Oh, Dons. Still my real footballing love, which pains me sometimes. But for right now, they've enjoyed a bit of a sweet spot. So I've taken a lot of joy out of that because I spent a good number of years in Glasgow where I took a good amount of stick, which was, playful but painful all at once.
Do you want to hear the stick that I took? So I was born and brought up halfway between Ibrox and St Mirren Park, and I chose Aberdeen at the age of 7 because they played in red. And I went to a secondary school with 1,999 Rangers fans and 1 Aberdeen fan. And it was the season that we lost in the last day to Rangers at Ibrox. So I've probably got severe PTSD from that. So I understand exactly what you're talking about. But did you have some sort of family link to football as well?
Yeah, I did. Most immediately, my dad played a lot, just amateur level, but I think he was good. He was a good player. He maybe could have played a little higher than amateur level if he wanted. He enjoyed it more for the fun side of the game and playing with his friends. So I saw a lot of my dad's football, and after he played, he got injured, and I used to go along with him when he coached. And then my mum has always had a season ticket at Tawdry for as long as I can remember. And she still goes to this day with her best friend that she's always gone with. But then sort of further back from that, on my mum's side, my great-grandfather actually played and coached, and is actually in the history books for Aberdeen. He was one of in their centenary year, they did the 25 greatest, I guess, players involved at the club, and he was one of those. So, there is a strong family connection, and his name was actually Donald Cunningham, but he played as Donald Coleman because in his era, it wasn't as lucrative a career as it is now. So actually, he played under a name that wasn't maybe identifiable to him. So his mum didn't find out that he was actually pursuing football, which there's some irony to then how my mum found out that I'd left the accountancy world and was going professional as well. I didn't quite last long enough with a secret name. I got found out on the day I signed my contract.
That's brilliant. You started with Aberdeen as a youth as Aberdeen Ladies, but the kind of powerhouse of Scottish football quickly snapped you up at a very tender year. Glasgow City became interested. How did they spot you and then swoop you down to Glasgow?
Actually that was, so I'd been involved at that point with the youth national team. I'd played for the under-19s. In the end, played for 3 years with them. I sort of played a year up first, and then my final year, we got to the youth under-19s European Championship. So that was quite a big step at that point in time. But obviously, I was playing for Aberdeen at the time, and I think we were roommates. I was sharing a room with Rachel Littlejohn, who now actually represents Ireland. But at the time, she played for Glasgow City, and she was like, they'd noticed that you're actually maybe not that bad a player and would be interested. So she was sort of the link to me having those conversations, and then things moved quite quickly, which obviously meant there was a few logistical issues. At the time, I was studying at Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen, so playing for a Glasgow team that trains at that point 3 nights a week is tricky. But I used to go down on a Thursday after class, train on a Thursday night, and that was the only day of the week I did club training. And then at a training program I followed that was sort of supported by the university as well. I used to train with the men's university team, which a lot of universities have a really good football program. Some obviously play in Saturday leagues as well, but it was challenging. I didn't know if I really wanted to train with the boys in the uni team, but I was supported by the manager at the time was also the director of sport at the university, so that there was never a choice. It was you will be training with the team. So that sort of helped that logistical challenge. It meant I did actually get a lot of good training whilst not having to do the travel. So I would train on a Thursday night with Glasgow City and then travel at the weekend as well for games, which of course most of the games are based in the Central Belt. So my car racked up quite a few miles, but I enjoyed it. I really loved playing football at that point in time. There's still a lot, even to this day, there's a lot of some of my favourite memories connected to that period when, when you compare it, it was very much amateur from the perspective of the finances. The club was really aggressive in trying to develop the game and the demands of the game and training and structure and all those different things. But the reality was, you were paid to play. But it was a good environment. It was a good decision, and it's a club that I definitely still are net fond of.
Glasgow City were effectively like the Queen's Park of the 1880s. They were kind of pioneers. They were trying to take football forward into professionalism, dominating everything. But then over their shoulders, they've got the old firms starting to take notice and starting to nick a couple of players away. But you'd bouncers like Peter Caulfield, Eddie Lecky Black. Did they have much of an influence on you early on?
Yeah, big influence. I think, Peter was more, bit more business orientated. He was the person that signed me firstly, and at that time, the owner, Laura Montgomery, was still a player. So I actually played centre back with Laura, who now obviously runs the club. Eddie was sort of the genius for the tactics, and he was probably one of the first most, knowledgeable and significant coaches I would have had in terms of the attention to detail and the things that you learn. And I think that was part of what made it enjoyable. Obviously, it's, people think, well, you were winning every week and you won trophies and that must be nice. You have Champions League and all those things. And obviously those things were nice. But truthfully, and if you speak to people that were at the club around that same time that I was there, sort of, like, I think it was 2009, I maybe first went there until sort of 2014. Players often talk about it, training. The training environment was so competitive that the demands every day were really, really high. And I think when I think about it, for me, that was one of the things that made me love it the most. It was that almost every day. By the time I left to actually go professional, we trained 4 mornings and 4 nights. And some of those mornings were part of it. The Institute of Sport funded some of it in the gym access and some of the conditioning elements. It wasn't all football training that. But when I think about now, the amount of times I train a week, I was training as many times as I was back then. But you also were just navigating 50, 60 hours of work in amongst it as well. So that was really good, really good. They really drove the game forward, and certainly Peter is someone that's been in the game a long time, and he's made a big impact, and in a totally different way to how Eddie made impact. He, as I say, was more of the football, the X and the O's.
You touched on the getting qualification in Europe, and 3 seasons you got into the knockout stages in the Champions League, and you can see from the results, like maybe one of the differences you've got in the game, because it's still developing, is you've got a large truncation of ability. To some of the scores are quite high, which you'd maybe kind of raise your eyes at in European competition. Some of the names in there that you actually beat, like you beat FC Tov, the Netherlands, of course, Theo Snerdo's old club. I'm booked in to see Theo in November. I'll mention that you beat him. I'm sure he'll take that kindly. But you beat Standard Liège as well. You gave Arsenal a good game as well when you played them. And Arsenal, like the pinnacle, Arsenal for like 20, 30 years were the best team in England. So you could see how the competition was developing. But it must have been fun for you at that point, so young in your career, getting to travel Europe, playing some games. Did you notice anything in Europe and realise that, in fact, they're quite ahead of us in terms of how they look at the game and their infrastructure?
I hear actually a couple of stories on all of that. So I think as a whole, I remember thinking back, like, we always seem to draw at some point, like the German champions, which at the time Germany, probably in international football, were one of the few teams that competed with the US. I think USA and Germany kind of were going head to head for the number 1 in the world spot quite often. They were sort of the 2 powerhouses. And I felt every year at some point we eventually drew a German team, and that was that. And I remember one of the first years, it was early on, but we had to play Potsdam, and they had won the German league that year. And I remember we were going, it was 2 legs, we were going there for, it was something awful in aggregate. It was like 16-0 in aggregate, it ended up being. But when we were traveling over there, someone was chatting on the plane, they were like, would you take a draw? And we naively were like, no, I think if, we get things right, we could get more than a draw out of the game. And obviously then we ended up flying home to have to play them in a second leg, having to overcome a 9-0 defeat. So I think looking back, we would certainly have taken a draw. But there was something sort of nice about that naivety of we had this confidence that was like a really big part of who we'd become as a team. But equally, there was a realization of these teams were on a different level. They operated with a much different budget. And the women's game, if you go back, 12 years, the women's league in Scotland was it was so young and barely even off the ground in the sense of where it was growing to try and become, on its journey to being somewhat professional, as you would say it is now, with probably the top 4, maybe 5 teams operating at a good level in terms of the structure that they've put in place. So yeah, at that point, we were so far behind in terms of even what we knew was the standard. Even at that point when I was playing, I never actually had that. I never had the sort of dream and expectation at that point I would even play professionally, because it was something that was quite difficult to actually see as a vision. I'd studied accounting and finance at university. Football was the side part to that. It was the escape. It was the part that helped me through exams. Yeah, I took it extremely seriously. I was, very serious about training. I'm overly competitive. So I don't really do anything in half measures. But I always just was like, football's what I do in the early mornings or the evenings and at the weekend, and I work through the week. So it almost still amazes me when I look back to think we even managed what we did manage. And as you mentioned, there was some good results. The win over FC20 for me is quite a significant game, because it was my first 90 minutes coming back from my ACL injury. And I actually scored in that game as well. So that was, I think I had started one game before that and sort of played 45, but that was the first game I started and finished. So that was sort of a really nice, kind of memorable moment that I look back on and know was fairly significant, because it was not too long after that I ended up going professional. So I sort of look back on that point.
Who was the champion that helped accelerate the growth of women's football in Scotland? Because 1972, the FA voted not to have was a Scottish Women's League or Scottish Women involved in international competition. They had the cast and vote, and they kiboshed Scotland participating. So you did get to see Rose Riley and a pomp in the 70s. And when I was growing up, the concept of women playing football professionally was ridiculed. It wasn't conceived whatsoever. But there's been a concerted effort, possibly from the 90s onwards. Somebody's got in there and pushed the concept of women being able to play football professionally in Scotland. Is there a certain champion you can think of that's done that?
I feel this is dangerous territory, because I'm sure there's many people, and I won't even be aware have made such a contribution. The people I know and have been impacted by certainly include the likes of Laura Montgomery and Carol Ann Stewart, who, from a league perspective, they were the ones that they started Glasgow City, and for me, for such a long time, drove the game forward. Now obviously they're still trying to do that, whilst also competing with teams that have bigger budgets and much more infrastructure already in place in terms of their teams affiliated to clubs in the men's game as well. But the work they did was without question pioneering, because the hurdles they had to jump over and the hoops they had to jump through to just probably push the game to where they did, every year. It's almost that, like, it's hard to understand how they even had the awareness to want to do those things. There's other people as well. Obviously, there's people within the association that have played a key part. And, since my involvement, I think people in charge of the women's section were Sheila Begbie when I was first involved in the international setup. She similarly had, a huge amount of work to do being in the association with a lot of people that, some maybe with more intention than others, but for a large part, most people just didn't see the women's game as something that was feasible. There's a lot of people who I don't think did that with any sort of, maliciousness. I think it was almost just they couldn't see that it could happen. So someone like Sheila being in that role, she had to have the vision. And then Anna Signol was the first national team coach that I worked under in the senior team. And I also saw her take a program that was in place. She wasn't the first women's manager, but there was people before her. But she was somebody who I also then got to experience and see the graft and the work that she put in to try and, once again, sort of knock down some barriers, try and push for more in every area, in terms of revenue and funding and standards and training, the amount people trained, what was possible. I remember when, I used to train once a week when I think I played for Aberdeen. We trained on a Tuesday night. And I remember being asked, could you train maybe 2 more nights a week? You could do a Tuesday, a Wednesday, and a Friday. And I remember at the time being like, no, I'm far too busy for that. I don't quite know what I was busy doing. But that, even just that simple possibility of training more than 1 night a week, I was like, well, that's easy. Train on a Tuesday. Why do I need to train more than on a Tuesday? You can just laugh at the silly little thoughts that you had. But again, they weren't for a bad reason. I wasn't trying to be resistant. It's just having the capacity to open your mind to change. And sometimes that's one of the hardest things. And all these people that I've mentioned, I've seen the work that they've had to put in to just make small changes. And that, over time, those small changes become monumental in terms of where it's taken the game. And that's in a relatively short space of time. And I certainly think there could have been more growth, but not because they haven't done a good job or others haven't done a good job. It's just sometimes really difficult to convince the right people at the right moment to take the game where it needs to. And I think other countries or other clubs are often a good example, and we're continually reminded of that. You look at, I always think Arsenal, as you've mentioned, them are a really good example. Not that long ago, they maybe were only getting 5,000 fans at the Emirates, and sort of everyone was saying, oh, what's the point in playing there? Like, there's not an audience for this. And in a very short space of time, you get the marketing right, you get the sales right, you get the product and the branding right. And very quickly, I think their average attendance last year was certainly in the big games, they were around 60,000. And that's happened although they've been in the game for a long time, just getting that thing right and sort of just, the switch flips and you're like, yeah, we're up and running. And you see the impact it can have. And sort of these are the reminders I always think to kind of stay encouraged and to keep learning from people around, because I think the game has grown enormously. I've been part of it. I've seen it. But I also think there's huge amount still to come. And that excites me quite a lot, because I feel like I've been there when, as I say, when I played for Glasgow City, senior football, I was paying monthly subs to be there.
You mentioned Notts County, one of the famous names in English football. They were in the inaugural Super League in England. I think they just transitioned from being from Lincoln. So how did the move come about with you moving down to Notts County? Because I know how it happens in the kind of the men's game. There's a wee brown envelope, some money under the table. But with your accountancy background, you would refuse that. You would have said, no, I've got an invoice, I want to get paid properly. But how did the transfer at Notts County come about?
It was a kind of part of the story of where my mum finds out I'm no longer an accountant without me telling her, which wasn't quite my intention. But I'd recently qualified. I qualified in October of 2013 as a chartered accountant. And I worked for EY in Glasgow, and I have to say they'd looked after me very well in my 3 years, because I needed a few extra days of annual leave to kind of meet the demands of going away in the Champions League with Glasgow City, going away with the national team, through the camps they had through the year. And then on top of that, there was days I needed for leave for actually sitting my exams. So I was very fortunate that the partner at the time in the audit department was a big Scotland fan. I still speak to him. He still sends me emails every so often, and we have a catch up. But he used to, the firm wanted to support me doing what I was doing, and they do that a lot as much as possible. They're a big firm, and therefore they probably have more scope to be able to do this than other firms might. But they like to encourage these things. They have other, lots of others have good examples that would be sort of similar. But they needed to sign me off on it on a lot of extra days. But he basically, once I qualified, I remember he called me into a meeting towards the end of that year, and I was sort of panicking because you only really have a meeting with one of the partners if you've done something wrong. I think there's no other reason really why somebody of my level would need to speak to a partner. So that was a bit alarming when that calendar invite popped up in my inbox. But he basically pulled me aside, and he obviously could see that the women's game was also changing. He followed my career closely. He was really invested, and he kind of realised that two things. I think one, I think he genuinely thought if you want to play professionally, you need to go now because you're at an age whereby you might miss the boat if you don't go now. I was 20. And on top of that, he was like, as a competitive person, if you stay within the firm, you're going to want to keep working your way up through the firm. And once you start working your way up through the firm, like there's less and less scope for us being able to give you the amount of time off that you'll need if you want to keep playing football. And he sort of recognised, like, if the football doesn't work out, you can definitely fall back on this, but can't really do it the other way. You can work your way up the chain and then realise, oh, I wish I had done the football. By that point, you know. So he sort of was the one who really was the initial, kind of the penny dropped when he had that meeting with me, and he was like, I think you should go and see what's possible. Is there a move on the table that you're not aware of? So I ended up getting an agent that was recommended through someone else who'd done something similar. I didn't know that many players that had moved from, Scotland to become pro. So it was fairly foreign to me. I wasn't particularly clued up on it. But the agent I used at the time, really nice guy. He sort of, there was a couple of offers on the table, let's say. And one of the days we went down to Notts County, the manager, Rick Passmore, he's now at West Ham as the assistant. He was really keen at the time. He was like, look, we want to sign you, but would love you to come here. I'd love to sit you down. I'd love to sit and have a cup of tea in person. And that was probably a really big part for me because, some of the other offers were clubs that would be considered bigger clubs. But just, meeting someone in person, and I think getting that feel for it, being my first move into professional football, that was what I had the most comfort with. That felt the right move. So anyway, what happened was while I was down there, ended up being, we signed the forms. They obviously were teed up. They were well versed in the process compared to me. So they were like, if this all plays out, we'll get the pictures, we'll get it done. It will be over the line. So we had all that done. And I was in the car with my agent driving back to Glasgow. Meanwhile, the news had kind of got out very quickly, and Reporting Scotland had picked it up. So my mum was sitting watching Reporting Scotland, and popped a picture of me holding like a Notts County scarf or holding the shirt, something like that, on BBC Reporting Scotland. So immediately my phone rang. This was my mum being like, what on earth have I just witnessed on my television screen in front of me? And so, I had to do a little bit of backtracking and digging myself out a hole there. But that was how it came about.
She was just worried you'd signed for St Mirren.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, I mean, it was a really, for Notts County's kind of first season in the league, they did well in the sense that they became competitive. They weren't too far off the top. Yeah.
What a good team.
Everton were relegated. I don't actually think that's happened in the men's game. I think Everton are one of the teams that's like always been in the top flight in England. So it shows how well you did. And it created notice because the next season you were off to the USA. So you're going to have to tell us how you were snapped up by Seattle.
Yeah. So that, well, the manager at the time was Laura Harvey. So she obviously was had gone over there a couple of, I think 2 years earlier, from Arsenal. So he'd been part of, a long-serving kind of staff at Arsenal, kind of worked through the academy, worked with the first team, and they had so much success. And she'd moved to Seattle. So that was essentially the link. And Kim Little, who I'm very close with, although playing in Seattle really drew us much closer, but she was already there. She'd moved the season before, and I sort of found over, the course of my career, the opportunities typically come when you least expect them to. And it really is about just being in the right place at the right time almost. And there's very few players, you're talking probably about the top, I don't know an accurate number, but only really the top 2-3% of players have a vast amount of choice of where they go. I feel like before I was in football, I kind of imagined it was as a player, like you had a lot more choice. If you played for a good club, you probably could go and move to another good club. Like that. It typically works a lot more based on the opportunity that arises at the moment. So you need the team that you want to go to need someone in your position, right? There are some players that probably, if you were a Sam Kerr or a Viv Miedema, you probably can say, I want to go to this club. And you maybe have a little more flexibility on that move being possible at more times than others. But for the most part, most moves actually are just about being in the right place at the right time. And Seattle needed a bit more depth at centre back. And I actually when I first went, the expectation for me was you're coming in as a squad player. We have 2 centre backs that played last season that are fit and healthy that will likely play this season. And I respected that, but I also really wanted to play. And I think that first season, I didn't start the first game. And they stuck with the same backline they'd had the year before. But then after that first game, I think we either got beat or we drew, and it was the only game we lost that season in the league. After that first game, I played every game. So that was a really cool first experience playing, the NWSL. I think it still probably gets a little bit of, or doesn't get quite the credit it deserves. It's a really competitive league. A lot of people think of it just as a very physical league. There are a lot of physical demands. There's a lot of very athletic players playing the league, and there's obviously factors like the heat and altitude in different places that add more challenge to that physical demand on you. But there's a lot of really good technical players, and there's a lot of really good coaches there who to me, like I enjoyed the football, and I don't feel like I played it differently when I was there than I do typically here. I feel like I'm the type of player that likes football. A lot of Harvey's a coach that very much likes football, the tactics, the small details. So that was kind of how the move sort of was just an opportunity, and I felt it was a really big one, and I obviously knew Kim being over there, so that was almost a little bit of a safety blanket in it.
It was a very high profile squad you joined as well. Your goalkeeper, her dad was in Star Wars Solo, and you also had Megan Rapinoe in that team as well, who became very high profile players in football. How did you find them as teammates?
Loved them. Hope was someone who was one of the hardest working people I've ever worked with. Trained, on the daily hours more than others, was out really early with the goalkeeper coach, trained for the full session with the team, obviously, and then would train afterwards as well. You could see why she was a top level goalkeeper and hugely talented, and loved working with her. Was quite a privilege to play with someone who's, the caliber that she was. And Pino is someone who's very charismatic, great teammate, great energy in the changing rooms. Obviously, again, an unbelievable player, but very much people person. And, I think probably when I was there, she has since grown to, her fame and her status has grown significantly. She obviously takes on a lot of things outside of football as well. She's really passionate about doing the greater good, which some people love and some people don't love so much. But I very much just appreciated her as being that person that was, she's just like a friendly, loud character in the changing room. She's the type of person that brings everyone together. And, both those players you mentioned, that despite sort of their fame and level, they were very down to earth in terms of being part of the team and having people around to their houses, having social events, being very active in that front. And those are really important things within team dynamics that they very much on very seriously, and wanted to enjoy and make sure that was something that they were strongly involved in different ways. Hope was actually quite quiet and a lot more shy, but Pino was loud.
There was something really kind of funny that I found in my research with Hope Solo. Is it okay if I poke fun slightly at her husband? He get arrested once for driving under the influence, but he was driving the US women national team's van. So there was two things that cropped up from that. One, why does the US women's national team not have like a bus, or why do they not fly? Why are they all chucked in the back of a van? That doesn't sound very professional.
So this is a thing that was an adjustment when I played in the US. They do that when they're on the road, when they travel, because they have a lot more freedom, sort of in terms of around meal times and around time off. So they do go to training, or sometimes they go in advance of training, but there is team buses, but they also have hire cars, which they call vans because they're like 7, 8 seaters. And it's basically, so if you're in a hotel and it's an afternoon off and you want to go to the shops, or you want to go and get something to eat or get a coffee or whatever, the players are able to go. So that was an adjustment actually playing in the US, because we did that as well when we travelled as a team and there was vans. And that to me was so different. I was so used to being in that environment where like you go where you go when everyone goes together and you all arrive at the same time and you all have to be at certain places at the same time, and no one's kind of allowed out with that routine. Whereas it was a lot more flexible when I was in the US, and that was an adjustment for me.
Julie Ertz turning up saying, I scored a hat-trick today, and somebody saying, shut up, get in the back of the transit, I just thrown it in. But it's also the notion like John McGinn's wife getting done for driving the Scotland team bus after too many sherries or whatever. From you being in the US, how much of an adjustment was it for you then to still be able to represent Scotland? Because there's a lot of to and fro and back across the Atlantic.
Yeah.
Seattle was in the furthest west time zone. Was there jet lag? Did you get...
Oh, gosh.
Did you... I mean, I was about to say something that's not very nice. You're a tall girl because you're a centre half. Somebody might need leg room. Do you get a nice seat in the plane, or do you get squashed into economy?
So the jet lag was bad. That was probably the toughest thing. I used to come back on camp, and especially with the time difference with work, you sometimes not arrive until the Monday. Sort of Monday morning would be a luxury if you arrived on the Monday morning, but sometimes it was a Tuesday morning. And normally the first night you're so tired you're all right. Then night 2, not so good. Night 3 gets slightly worse. Night 4 would be your worst, which typically was the night then before a game. So that was always a tough adjustment. I think over time, I don't necessarily know that you get used to it, but I think you get used to the feeling of not feeling good. So therefore, not feeling good doesn't feel as bad, because you you sort of have the expectation of how you feel, so it doesn't seem quite as shocking to the system. And, you know, you try different things. There's loads of things that they have that they try and encourage you to try and do, you know, change your watch immediately to the time it's going to be where you're arriving. So you then to try and have your meals when you would expect to have your meals. Because I eventually used to find that the reason I would wake up at sort of 3 in the morning would be because I was hungry, because that would be sort of 7 p.m. back in America. And that's when my body would be anticipating I'm about to have dinner. So eventually I did start getting into this habit of I'd have a snack beside the bed, and about 3, 4 in the morning I'd wake up and I would just eat. And that helped me fall back asleep. But different things work with different people. Claire Emsey obviously has the same sort of challenge at the moment. She's back from LA. And there's been a couple of times where we've been meeting for training and someone's like, has anyone seen Claire? And she's accidentally fallen asleep in the afternoon, and someone's had to knock on her door and drag it out. And I never quite had one of those experiences, but that was definitely tough. I never found it quite as bad going the other way, but coming home was always tricky. And then the leg room, I was involved along with Gemma Fay in terms of bringing in, you know, sort of the stat. There's a contract now that exists between the association and the national team players, you know, men and women, that just looks after sort of the overall standards and care when you're away. And so when I first was traveling back and forth from sort of 2015, we flew economy. So in terms of legroom, I didn't get a fancy seat. But then it was established a certain length of, you know, if you were flying over a certain length of time, you would get a better seat. So it's now a lot better, and it's genuinely, it makes such a massive difference, because if you can lie down on the plane, then it definitely helps. You get a little bit of sleep, which can make a big difference by the time you arrive and have to then go into training, because you can imagine training for 3-4 days for an international game. The intensity is quite high. The demands are high. You have to adjust quickly. There's not a lot of time to get through all the things you need to cover. So it's a really quick week. So just those small things are important. So yeah, that's really good that that's now something that's just standardized for everyone.
I genuinely have this question written down here. I'm not making this up. This question I was going to ask later was, does Claire Emsley snore? Yes. What seems to be the answer?
They don't actually know.
I'll tell you why it's written down. There's a reason for it. So you were incredibly young when you made your debut for Scotland. I think you were 19. You were chucked on against France. Do you still have very vivid memories of stepping onto the pitch in dark blue for the first time?
Yeah, I started that game. So I don't remember actually walking onto the pitch. I remember the night before. I remember the meeting. Like, the most vivid memory I have is the meeting of when we got the team sheet, or the presentation, and that sort of that's kind of like the realization moment of like, wow, this is really, really cool that this is about to happen. So that, I don't know why that's such a strong memory, but we were in Cyprus. We were at the Cyprus Cup that we went to quite regularly when I was first involved in the national team, and that window, and sort of February, March time, there's an international window, and it's often a window in the calendar that's not a competitive fixture. So there was various sort of friendly tournaments, as you'd call them, and yeah, I think I just, that's like my most vivid memory. And I obviously we got beat, so obviously that's not as nice a memory, but it's pretty cool to start your international career against a team like France, who at the time still are one of the best countries.
You eventually assumed the armband from Gemma Fay. How does the captain of an international team get appointed?
Well, I was appointed at the game by Shelley Kerr. Called me, and it would have been one of her first, I don't know if it was her very first camp or just one of the first ones. I think it was maybe ahead of our first camp. And I was in Seattle, and I remember she phoned me. I was on our way into training. I can remember I'd stopped to get coffee, and I was standing outside the car. I remember chatting through the phone. And it was weird because, well, this isn't that weird, but I remember her telling me, and when you're in that moment that someone's telling you over the phone, like, I'm not great at expressing how I feel. Unless I'm angry. If I'm angry, then you definitely know about it. But otherwise, I'm not great at expressing other emotion. So I almost needed the conversation to be in person, so Shelley could appreciate what that meant for me, because that was really hard for me to articulate in words over the phone back to her. But no, that was obviously quite another kind of monumental moment for me. I think I'd had the opportunity to be captain for sort of odd games when Gemma, either was injured or wasn't starting. So I'd had a few moments where I'd had that opportunity, and I was really hopeful that I was in with a chance. I don't think it's necessarily something you aspire to be. I think it's just almost a very honourable thing to be awarded, and I never expected it. I just was always hopeful that my name would at least somewhat be in the mix, players that might be in contention. Once I obviously knew that Gemma had retired after the Euros. So yeah, that was that meant a lot to me. It still means.
I mean, the role that everybody sees is you walk out holding the hand of the mascot, hoping the mascot doesn't have a cold and you end up missing the game, and then it's coin toss. But what is the role of an international captain that people don't see? What kind of duties do you have behind the scenes?
Yeah, it's definitely a lot more than that, and I think sometimes that's often what people associate it to be. Very often people think they'd like their favourite player to be the captain, which over time I've established that I'm not.
You understand that you've jumped that gap between kind of women's football and men's football when you just start piling on with hatred for like no rational reason. That's when you've been universally accepted as a footballer. So,
but there's a lot. I mean, essentially the role is you put yourself you almost never put yourself first, I think is the easiest way to describe it. Which when you think of you're doing something that requires you to be at your absolute optimal performance, you can imagine that putting yourself first would be a massive advantage. So to have to never put yourself first for the most part does have a lot of challenges. But I think also that is part of the job, being able to trust and rely on the things you do daily that enable you to do what you're capable of, whilst also being the person that a lot of people look up to and respect and listen to and feel better for knowing you're part of the team. And I fully, for the most part, try and lead by example. But I also know that I'm somebody who I will have conversations that aren't particularly easy to have if they're needed. But yeah, there's a lot of conversations I find, like, if we just talk about international football, I find the first 24, 36 hours. And that's because you're part of so many conversations, because the first day, everyone's sort of trying to adjust to being back. Every little department probably has little things that needs to be filtered through to the players. And always say the person they filter things through to the players by coming to me. So, the first kind of day and a half, it's just a lot of conversation about getting everyone back into the routine of the national team environment, the way we do things, the team meetings, saying hello to everyone. That sounds silly, but it's a big part of arriving on the Monday. It drains a lot of people mentally just because it's a lot of stimulus. And so that's challenging. And then, of course, on top of that, over the years, there's been different things that we've gone through whenever there's sort of big issues outside of football that are impacted within football. You're part of those conversations, you try and act in the right way, you try and guide the players in a way that's respectful to different things. I think in the past few years, we've had examples of that. We obviously very recently played Israel, and that was something that brought some other conversations, as you can imagine, with what's currently happening in the world. Not that long ago, we had to play Ukraine, and we had to play them in a neutral country, because we obviously couldn't fly to Ukraine. So these little moments, they come with additional stress and your conversation requirement. And part of your role as captain is to try and deal with those without letting it impact the broader group in a negative way, and also trying to make sure you behave in a way that's in the best interest of everyone, primarily for football, but also, some people say football get involved with politics or shouldn't get involved with outside things, but the reality is it does, and it can have an impact. And if it's going to have an impact, you want it to be in the best way it can. I think we've got a lot of people who take sort of their broader responsibility very seriously. So we always want to make sure we represent ourselves.
One way that you did represent Scotland on a global stage was the first ever time that the Scotland women's team qualified for a tournament in 2019, the World Cup in France. And in qualifying, you're absolutely superb. You only dropped one game. That was to Switzerland. But in true Scotland style, you still went into the last round of games, still needing to win to get through. You had to play Albania. Switzerland were playing Poland at the same time. Scotland scored through Kim Little early on. Albania equalised. And you must have just been thinking, going, oh no, we're going to Scotland this? Or was it a case of you as captain saying, right, every single one of you, I'm going to the World Cup, you're not letting me down?
I think in that game, I think we always thought we'd have to go through the playoffs. So I remember at the time thinking, we just have to win. So when they equalised, it was one of those moments where you're like, why did we do this to ourselves? But at the same time, I did have a lot of confidence that we would find a way to win the game, which we did. But we didn't realise until near sort of the last few moments of the game that Poland and Switzerland were actually drawing. So we needed Switzerland to draw points, which I think we thought, Poland were a good team. They are a good team, and we've had two really tough games against them. But I think we anticipated Switzerland wouldn't drop points, and so we were sure we'd kind of just accepted we probably, we had to win against Albania, but we'd have to go through the playoffs. And then it wasn't until the last few moments there was kind of you could just feel the energy from the bench. The subs were sort of all on their feet, and you were like, initially you were like, what's going on over there? Thinking, it's strange. And then sort of quite quickly you're like, oh wow, there actually is a reason why they're on their feet, and it's because eventually the information came on that Poland and Switzerland had drawn, so a win was going to be enough for us. So that is hands down still, I think, the best moment of my international career. That game and that experience. It was an amazing night that I still can picture where the ball was in the pitch when the final whistle went, and very vividly could see everyone charging around and jumping up and down. That was such a good
Did you
moment.
watch the draw for the World Cup?
I don't think I actually did see the draw. I'm more somebody, I probably would find that quite nerve-wracking, and I would just rather know who we have. So I probably would have planned to do something, if the draw was at 1 o'clock, I would plan to make sure I was doing something between 1 and 1:30. So I just could bed see the outcome rather than have to go through the process of the balls coming out of the pots and find out that way. I don't remember watching it, which makes me think I didn't, and that is exactly what I've done. I've found something to fill my time.
I'm a Scotland fan, right? So obviously when I saw England's name dropping out, I was jumping up and down. Yes, we're going to absolutely battle them. This is brilliant. Who's more realistic in actually having to play them? Were you a bit more cautious, now kind of doom mongering with picking England, or were you like, brilliant? I know them all. I know how to play them. We're going to do this.
You know what? I think I'd played in an England game, the opening game as well, and we drew them in the Euros, and that day we lost 6-0, and that was not a particularly pleasant experience. So I think when I saw England win in our group, I thought I would have quite liked another team because we got England last time. But I also think it's a good fixture to have. I think everyone loves that fixture. So naturally you're like, yeah, let's play England. But yeah, I think you always look forward to that. I've played England a lot of times.
Have you beat them?
I have beaten them. I have beaten them, which was nice. But they've definitely beaten them, so that's not so nice. But you love playing that game. It's if you like football and you appreciate a rivalry, so therefore you appreciate that fixture. And it is kind of nice because I think it is a rivalry that for the most part is enjoyed. I think it's not something that I like to think there's not really much trouble around it, especially in the women's game. I think it's a rivalry that's enjoyed. And on top of that, I know a lot of the players. I certainly did in the Euros in 2017. I did in 2019 too. So there's also an enjoyable part because you've a respect for one another, I would say. And then on top of that, it's a fixture that comes with quite a lot of glamour. So I was excited. I was excited that we had two teams that weren't European as well. And obviously we had Japan, who in the two World Cups before that had been very, very good. Argentina, which that's, we felt that was a game we could win. And obviously that was heartbreaking in the end, but at the same time, it's pretty cool to see you've played Argentina in the World Cup.
Well, let's touch on that, okay? So I'm going to give you a very strict warning because you're obviously still playing and you're still subject to FIFA disciplinary rules, right? So you just make faces when I'm talking, and then I can understand exactly what you're thinking, but you don't have to express it. So the England game was kind of piloted with the Women's World Cup. It was one of the introductions. It was still in its infancy. England got a penalty awarded against Scotland for an accidental handball. Interesting to go back and look at it now to see if the rules held up. You could maybe argue that England were better in the first half, Scotland were better in the second half, and it could have been a draw. Was it a penalty, do you think?
I think it probably would still be given as a penalty today. I think it's a really harsh rule. And I think there also has been, I remember we had a similar, not the same, but another moment against Japan.
We covered with Japan. Go on it.
That felt we didn't get. So then you sort of go, okay, well, if I get it, it does hit the hand, fine. But then when, you go to the next game and something similar happens and you don't get it, it's a bit like, well, it's just rather unfortunate.
After Scotland played Germany in the first round of the Euros just recently, we lost to Germany. They're a huge nation. It was a massive game. And playing England in your first group game, it's the same. It's a massive game. Did you have to haul the players back up, or was there a lot of determination after that result and you didn't have to do anything?
No, I definitely didn't have to rally the players. I think we took a lot from that first game. I think there was some frustration because points-wise we took nothing, but we very much gave a very good account of ourselves. And, you know, Claire got the goal, and there was other moments in the game where you thought, yeah, do you know, if things had just gone in our favour, we might have been lucky to get a point. And I agree with you. I think England in the first half were far better than we were. Second half, we gave a much better account of ourselves, and we were definitely in it. The players, I mean, you typically find this, especially at a national level, like the players can't comment for other nations, obviously, but playing for your country is just, like, I don't think you would do it if you weren't self-motivated to be there. Like, it's, I don't know, I can't imagine being there and not being motivated to just want the next game and the next game, and you just want it to never stop. Like, such an amazing opportunity to get to have in your life. Like, not many people get to represent their country or whatever they do. So motivation was always there, and it's the World Cup. And also, I think it was the first game. It wasn't like we got turned over like it happened. You know, we had tough time in the game of the Euros. We were right in it, and we had the chance to play Japan, who had been runners up the time before, and the time before that had won it. You're like, I absolutely want to be in that pitch against Japan, because it's going to be another massive opportunity for us and a really, really tough test. But let's absolutely.
Can I ask you a question? Like, did you notice that from playing in the World Cup, you obviously had a lot more eyes on you? Did you notice a lot more negative responses, especially on social media? Because I can't imagine being a Scotland player for the men's team and giving away a penalty like maybe Ralston did. He must have just not looked at social media for about 3 or 4 days, or it would have just been abuse. Did you start to get that when your profiles started getting raised as well by being in the World Cup?
I think that probably has slightly shifted. There's certainly more profile. There's more people, you know, with eyes in the game, and what comes with that is there's more good, and there probably is more criticism too. I wouldn't have said I directly found that from the World Cup, but it probably was also a period of time where there was a significant increase in the visibility of the game, and starting to probably be quite a shift, probably socially, in terms of how people viewed the women's game. And it kind of was around that time, I think, that maybe prior to that, people still thought, no, I just don't think this is ever going to get off the ground. I think now you can't argue that. You can argue you just don't enjoy the women's game, but you can't argue that it's not going to exist. Like, it exists, and it's going to keep growing and moving in a positive direction. There's all going to be all the major tournaments. There's going to be all the games and the big name teams, the big players. Like, these things will happen. You can choose to not watch it and not enjoy it, and that's you know, individual preference. But I think that was probably around the time where it started to be like, yeah, actually, this has a lot more momentum. I think we live in a society whereby people would much rather provide scrutiny than praise. So, there's certainly times when you get criticism and some not nice comments, but I think also, as I say, it's kind of become something we see in society a lot more than this is maybe really valuable or bringing much good. I think there's times when you're not always receiving it personally. So you just see it on other feeds. Even just in the last week, I've obviously followed the men's games and seen kind of the remarks. The constant narrative around it is negative, but there's a lot of people really positive about the national team. But quite typically, the stuff you see, people feel far more obligated to maybe say the negatives and the positives. So it can be a tough place, I think, especially social media, which is obviously where most people see most of the feedback. And then, it's good to have kind of safeguards for yourself around those. I don't particularly look at social media around games. The people who love you and who have feedback for you that's worth hearing typically don't tell you on social
they just
media.
think that you're working in an accountancy job somewhere and they don't notice you're playing gigs included TV.
That would be nice if they didn't notice me. That would maybe mean we got a big result.
So, the Japan game, this is when we start to get a feeling that it's going to be Scotland at a tournament again, because Japan took the lead with a penalty awarded by VAR.
Again.
Well, I don't want to say that. And then we have 2 penalty claims involving Erin Cuthbert, a foul and a handball. but it didn't seem like there was any VAR reviews that were carried out. Lana Cleland scored a goal, making it 2-1 minutes remaining, but there was a definite sense of injustice. I can remember feeling a sense of injustice at that point, thinking, well, we've not been treated fairly. But we go into the Argentina game knowing that a positive result, could take us through in third place, and we're 3-0 up, and then VAR comes in again. Argentina are awarded for a penalty for a foul. It was a lengthy VAR check. Wasn't you this time, was it? No, because and Alexander looked like she saved it, and VAR said she's off the line, and she had to take it again, and it ended up being 3-3. So Scotland had played well in a major international tournament, had not disgraced themselves in any way whatsoever. Did you come out thinking administratively we were maybe let down by the rules? That's a fair way of saying it. You won't get into trouble for agreeing with that.
Yeah, I think it was really tough. The Argentina game, I think, felt like it exposed a lot of the VAR rules all in the one game, which personally I'm not. I see the value in VAR. I think there's obviously we're going to continue to probably adjust the use of it. I think it's in a process of getting to a stage where we feel like it is actually benefiting the game. I think that there's loads of chat around it. And sometimes I feel empathetic for a lot of the referees, because there's a lot of decisions in football that are at the discretion of the referee, and they can be subjective. Like things like offside. To me, offside is pretty black and white. Like you're either off or you're not. The rule has got a lot of complexity. So I know there are also now things where people are like, well, that was at first phase, second phase, all these things. But for the most part, I think offside is a bit more black and white. So I think it's easier to define that. There's a lot of rules where it's like deliberate. You never know what's deliberate by somebody, like pretty much ever, because you're assuming judgment on somebody else. So then when you see referees trying to establish rules and then VAR are trying to think, well, did they definitely see that? Or did they misinterpret what they saw? Like there's just, some of it I think is difficult. And I think the reality was at the World Cup, it was one of the first uses of the VAR in the rules that they were applying it to. And I don't think a lot of those referees would have had much experience. Now, they might have they'd had a little bit of practice, but we even see now, there's referees that have been using VAR in the Premier League for the last few seasons. And it's still really tough. Like there's a lot of scrutiny. So for me, I think it was, it had to start somewhere. It started that World Cup. And I do think it definitely felt like we were on the wrong side of a lot of decisions that could have been different. That said, I think to be 3-0 up in a game with 15 minutes left, there's absolutely ownership on us for how that game finished. Looking back, like it's still a really harsh memory. The period after the World Cup was really, really tough. I was in the US at the time, so we were in season. So I pretty much had to just almost immediately I got a few days, but I had to get back on a plane and go straight back into season. And it was helpful because it meant you just had to crack on and get on with it. And then there was another part where that only really just suppressed feelings that eventually were going to come out. And I think that off season, across winter was tough, because eventually you process the emotions of what happened and you're trying to carry on, but it's also really hard to carry on because, we were so close to it being so different. And that's always one of the toughest things, or the what if, and I wish we'd done that differently. And you kind of relive moments over and over and over and over. So yeah, it was tough afterwards. And then sort of the campaigns that have followed that, there's been a lot of different challenges. And it's also just really hard to qualify for a major tournament because there's a lot of good teams. And
you can still qualify for a major tournament.
We can.
All we have to do is duct tape your hands to your sides against Hungary and we'll be absolutely fine. So we've got potentially 2 playoff games. You've got Hungary, definitely. If we get past the Magyars, then we're on to either Finland or, can't remember the other team. You're going to say I'm not looking that far ahead, so you won't answer it, so fair enough. But we've got effectively 2 games to qualify. And this is the toughest question you're going to have to answer, Rachel. Are we going to qualify?
I really, really hope so. Okay. I will say there is a lot of optimism. I think we've had a really positive Nations League. I think that's felt really powerful, and and upbeat. I think there was an element of, we were in League A, we had some tough games. I think we had some good performances. 2 games against Belgium were really good performances. We didn't get the results I thought we wanted, but even to get 2 draws against Belgium, they're a good team. That's nice in itself. I felt a lot of focus was put probably on, the 4-0 against Netherlands and the 6-0 against England, which I understand why, people see those performances and results and are disappointed.
They were the teams that were in the semi-finals of the World Cup, really not so. Or in fact, Netherlands were in the final and England won the Euros, but we don't ever hear about that. That largely goes unmentioned.
Yeah, so I think, a little bit of that perspective was missed. I felt like there was a narrative of kind of we were on this slippery slope and things weren't going well. We felt that wasn't quite a true reflection of how things felt within the group. So it's felt a period of kind of galvanizing everyone and trying to show, let's stay together and stick together. And we've had a nice little run into these games. So I know the squad feels good. I know there's a lot of optimism. Caroline Weir was back playing last weekend in competitive games. So that's something that I know all Scotland fans are excited about. The entire Scotland team is also excited about it. Along with how Emma Watson is also back playing. So it's nice that we also are getting some players who've had a tough time with injury, hopefully back available as well. I think just those little moments are really nice, especially both those players got injured with the national team. A lot of players were there when it happened, and that's always, it's emotional for a lot of people. I've had that injury, the ACL, and you know what's coming for those individuals, and it's not nice. So it's these little moments, these little things that just keep adding to the pile of positives. I think are important to remember. So I think we're excited. I think it's good to know your opposition, and Hungary are a good team. They've improved a lot. We've played them fairly recently, had good results, but they're definitely a team that have some very good players, some upcoming players, young players that are very good as well. So it's easy to look and think, we want to get through that, and we want to look to the next one.
I think the positive omen is the fact that Alec McLeish played for Scotland in a lot of major international tournaments, and like you, he upset the city of Birmingham by representing both Birmingham City and Aston Villa. I think that's just a perfect example. I've left the toughest question to the end, Rachel. I'm going to have to dip into this, but we have to talk about the scandal you were embroiled in during the recent Euros. You were invited on the BBC to be a pundit for the Scotland games, and you put a few jaws out of joint by being better than everyone. What have you got to say for yourself? I'm actually being very serious. I felt you were incredibly erudite, earnest, and passionate about football, and you presented a lot of ideas that perhaps people couldn't understand because of your inside knowledge of the game. So I felt you were absolutely fantastic during the tournament, and I say that working for a rival of the BBC, and I will be having conversations to see if we can poach you.
Yeah, do you know what? I had such a good time. It was such a big opportunity that I didn't anticipate to get, but similar to clubs, it just comes in the right place, right time. I do genuinely love football, and I think, the punditry world is one that often we see a lot of criticism. Fine, where it's valid. I think it probably oversteps the mark a lot of times. So I think for that reason, I was very flattered and appreciative of the positive feedback that I did get. I've actually just very recently had a bit of feedback, sort of formal feedback, and worked through a session to try and improve, which is obviously I want to do.
Means get rid of your Scottish accent. That's what that means in TV speak.
No, they like it. They like it. My friends from home will think I have a Glasgow twang when I do speak, so that's kind of what gives me the most stick. But I love football. I've watched so much football. Like from the youngest age, I used to literally walk up to the local park where there's about 20 pitches, and on a Saturday there'd be like 10 amateur men's games going on. They would just sit and find a corner flag that had 4 games kind of around it. I would just sit and watch these teams. And I've just watched so much football, and I love football. And almost to the point my family are like, oh, please stop talking about football. Like my brother almost despises it. He doesn't, but sometimes he wants to because he's like, I'm done with this conversation. I've just done that my whole life. So I think I just enjoy it. And I'm glad it was well received. But based on my feedback as well, there's a lot of room for improvement. So that'll be me practicing and hopefully getting lots more opportunities. I do enjoy it. I am still enjoying playing, but I also do love that side. And I've had a few different experiences and I've enjoyed it all.
Well, Rachel, you scored 18 goals in your international appearances for Scotland. You're one of the fastest players in the box to get your head in the end of the ball. So let's finish with a fast fire round for you, okay? Best opponent.
Wait, as in like a player?
Were you involved in attacks? Can you still need to hear about?
It's too late for him. Best opponent, I'm going to say... this is like rolling back the years, but I'm going to say Birgit Prince. She used to play up front for Germany. She got to play against her quite a few times, Champions League. She was...
Best teammate you've ever played with, either talented or just awesome person?
Definitely Kim Whittle.
She's like the Dalglish for Scotland, isn't she? Best goal scored.
I'm going to say that one against FC20, coming back from my ACL, that's up there. But because I've already answered that, I'm going to give another one. Probably I scored against, I think it was Hungary in late on last minute at Hampden. So I'm going to go with that one.
Could history repeat itself? I'm going to just like a tenner one now at the bookies, just in case. Right, this is a question I put in just because I thought I might have Frank McAvenny in the show. I don't know if this applies to the women's game, but the best prank witnessed in the game, you're probably a lot nicer to each other than the...
There's nothing, there's probably been a few things. Nothing's coming to mind. The girls at the moment do a thing when they try and scare people and get it on video. That's like a common roast now. That's not that like crazy in terms of this whole, scale of pranks. That's not winning awards. But
all
that's
right.
like
Best nickname that you've heard for a player?
On the spot, these. I reckon there would have been a few. I played with a girl in Aberdeen who retired not that long ago. Susan Murray. She used to get called Spidey or Spider. Probably one of my favourites. There's not too many now, Nicknames, Kate. I'm trying to think. There must have been some at Glasgow City. We were quite good at them at Glasgow City, but I'm trying to think. I can't think of anyone that was...
All right, best insult you've heard on the pitch. You still must talk to each other on the pitch and give each other abuse. That must be part of the game, surely.
A little bit. Sometimes like the least offensive ones are like the most offensive ones. Like if someone goes too far, you're like, it's a bit much. I remember this was Dusha was playing I was playing for Villa. She was playing centre mid. She was in front of me, and we were playing Spurs, I think, and the girl she was up against they were kind of going back and forth for a while, and after a while she just started saying she was ugly. Like that was it. Just she was ugly, and it almost was more offensive than if he had tried to use every expletive you could imagine, because it was like, yeah, but you're ugly. Oh. That was a silly one that I think is not really like it was. There are some people who are better at it than others. Most people probably don't get involved in it though. I don't think it is as prevalent as it might be otherwise.
Jill Scott with the camera focused on her. What's the best crowd chant you've ever heard? Crowd chant.
The best what chant? Crowd chant. Well, actually, just at the weekend, one of the girls has broken her nose when we were in Marbella, so she's got the mask, and the mask is black. So she kind of looks like Batman.
She broke her nose. You said that like everybody goes to Marbella and breaks their nose. It just happened.
Well, we're away on a football trip, and it was a sorry, I should have said that pre-season tour. Anyway, her name is Anna Patton, but because she's the Batman mask on, they were doing the Batman theme tune, and instead of saying Batman, one Patton, so like
That's good. That brings us to the end of another episode for the CSI Football Podcast. What we've learned today is that Rachel's going to tape her arms to the side when she plays against Hungary, just in case. And what Rachel doesn't know is she didn't tell her mum that she signed for Notts County, and I didn't tell her that I actually invited her mum along to attend the entire podcast recording. If you want to come in, not really. So your heart must have went for a wee bit there.
I knew there was no chance.
Well, you can join us next week for another forensic journey into the annals of Scottish football. Our website's at csi.com, so join us next week. And Rachel, thanks very much again for